Muy buenas noches, yo soy Carlos Fernando Villa y esto es Tiempo de Mercadeo Serie Internacional 2013. Como recordarán, la semana pasada estuvimos hablando en Cleveland con Ivana Taylor, una de las consultoras más afamadas del mundo. Con ella tratamos aspectos como las estrategias, la innovación, las comunicaciones y vamos a continuar en la noche de hoy, repito, en la ciudad de Cleveland, en el estado de Ohio. Esto lo haremos en un momento cuando regresemos, ya volvemos. Ivana, good evening and welcome back.
Well, thank you. It's great being here with you.
A lot of things to talk about with you, but then I would like you to tell us how to make a customer loyal, because you have a lot of experience on that. So how can we make customers loyal?
Well, the best way to make a customer loyal, of course, is to first understand who they are, right? So we want to understand exactly who the customer is. Perhaps we understand the industries that they're in, what matters to them. Just set a baseline for who is your customer, what matters to them, and maybe even do a little bit of preliminary research to understand why it is that they chose you in the first place, because we want to keep doing the things that work and we want to start understanding the things that don't work.
Jill Griffin is a lady who lives in Texas. She wrote books about loyalty. And when I did a program with her, she said the best way to make a customer loyal is to treat the customer like a human being. That's
Brilliant.
It. Just like a person.
And there's an author out there by the name of Tony Alessandro who's written a book called The Platinum Rule.
Yeah.
So it's taking what you said right there and taking it to the next level that I firmly believe in, is treating your customers the way they want to be treated, not necessarily the way you want to be treated. Mm-hmm. So I think a key component is really understanding exactly what that is.
So many marketers and companies around the world are trying to make customers loyal by asking them a lot of questions and having them grade what the service is all about or the product and things like that. Is that really something that makes a customer loyal?
Well, I'm not always a huge fan of market research, but there is a place for that. And I think that it matters to measure a couple things. The first thing is to measure what matters most. And there is a book out there called The Ultimate Question that Fred Reichheld wrote. And he found out through his research that there really is only one question that determines, that has a relationship to loyalty. And that is whether or not your customer would refer your company. And they call that the Net Promoter Score. And they find that customers who answer that question from 1 to 10, and anyone who answers the question, I believe it's less than 8, they call a detractor. And if they answer a question with a rating of 9 and 10, how likely are you to refer? If they answer that question with a 9 or a 10, they're called a promoter. So the simple calculation is you take the number of promoters and you subtract the number of detractors, and what you get is a percentage point. And your goal as a company for that particular question is to be above 80. Now, that's just a simple benchmark, right? It's
Yes.
one thing that you can set. But I think another critical component in measuring loyalty, the Gallup companies have taken it one step further and are looking at measuring engagement. And in today's marketplace, where your customers want to interact with you, they want to see your organization like a human being that they want to be in relationship with. So more engaged customers equals higher profitability.
I once read that if we could quantify the amount of loyalty that someone can become, that won't be higher than 70%. Do you agree with that?
Wow, 70%. But you know what that makes me think? It makes me
Don't tell me that you're thinking about marriages. Your husband? No, he has to be more than 70%.
Well, maybe my husband needs to be more than 70% loyal.
He better be.
But we're right back to the relationship thing, right? We may be married to a single person, and yet when we're shopping, we don't shop exclusively in one place.
Yeah, one thing is, husband and wife, and one thing is different is, a customer.
Exactly. I mean, for my husband's football watching needs, I am perfectly okay to share my loyalty with his friends. But I think that that's an important component. You know, we have so many choices, and maybe we as marketers have to firmly understand exactly what our customers are choosing and why they're choosing
Yes,
what they're
yes.
choosing. I heard an actually very interesting way of segmenting customers in terms of instead of segmenting them by demographics. I think this is maybe some people will say it's like psychographics, but this guy talked about him. He was a demographer, and he talked about classifying customers in terms of worlds. So let's say, for example,
By that you mean behavior?
likes, things that they like, and choices that they
Yeah.
make. So we are not, our choices are not a function of our age and education per se. But let's say, for example, let's pretend that I am a cyclist and I love riding bikes, which I'm not, but let's pretend that I am. So I may choose to drive a cheaper car, and I may choose to live in a smaller house. However, so all my purchases are on this lower income level scale. And yet, I have a $10,000 bicycle.
Yes.
In fact, I have a neighbor just down the street who lives in a modest home. He's a business owner. He runs several companies. The man probably has a lot of money, but he lives in this modest home. However, he has, I think, he runs, he's a, what is those called? A marathon, not marathon, triathlon. He is a triathlete. He and his family spend the bulk of their money on travel to these different events and on his equipment. So his bicycle probably costs more than his car. And so
I
that
believe
would
it.
be, so to the bicycle company, he is a high-end consumer, and yet to every other purchase, he's not very brand loyal, and he's not very loyal to maybe any particular product, whereas he's probably extremely loyal in those areas where he has an interest.
And he may be loyal to a brand of bicycles that he may change in 2 or 3 years because some new type of bicycle may come up to the market and then he's going to get the new bike, which has happened all the time.
But one thing I don't know about him is I don't know where he purchases his bikes. And
Uh-huh.
we're right back to the customer loyalty experience, right? I mean, if we want to increase our loyalty, it's more than the product and its features,
Yes, absolutely.
right? So I think that as business owners and as marketers, it's our mission these days to identify exactly, here I go again, with what matters most to this ideal customer, because then we can create that match. And if we are focused on exactly what matters most to them, and we do that exceptionally well, they will choose us every time, regardless of price.
No question about it. Let's go to a commercial break and we'll be right back.
Excellent.
Vamos a unos comerciales y ya estamos de nuevo con ustedes. Ana, I would like you to tell us more about the net score, or the net promoted score.
I'm happy to do that, Carlos. It's actually a lot easier than companies think to get started on that process. Probably the best place to start is by setting a firm understanding, maybe doing some qualitative research, having some conversations with customers, internal conversations.
Not focus group.
No, not focus groups, but I mean, just sort of gathering the baseline information so that you can understand how you're going to structure the research that you do. It's really, rather than, I like to use the word tormenting your
Okay.
customers with many, many questions that don't make a difference. It's a good idea to focus on just a handful, like maybe 3 questions, for example, and that are more transaction focused. So if you have a retail business and your customer comes in, let's say you are a mechanic or a garage, and someone comes in and has their car serviced, you can ask them about that transaction and those things that are important around that transaction. You know, did we keep your appointment? Did we get it done on time? Did the estimate match the final bill? You know, you select a couple questions, and then finally, you have to set that question up. You have to get your customer thinking about that experience so that they can internalize it, remember it, and respond accordingly. If you just ask the question, they're really going to take what's their latest experience, and or maybe they had a bad day, and it's going to get plastered on that net promoter score. So it's very important to give your customers context and to ask a couple questions before you ask the referral question. Mm-hmm. They have to match and be relevant. Another thing to do is to treat that net promoter score not as a grade. Many businesses are going to look at that and say, if we have a net promoter score of 70 or 60, the CEO has a complete fit, and maybe they yell at their employees or their management team, and what are we going to do? It's really important to look at your net promoter score as an opportunity to discover what's missing for your customer that's keeping them from coming back to you or from referring your company. And finally, a big criticism of the net promoter score is that the score and the improvements are not shared with the actual employees who are delivering the customer experience. So it's very important to not just do the research, but to have a conversation about the results of that net promoter score and how to improve it.
That makes me think about something. A shopping mall where there are a lot of stores, a lot of theaters, movie theaters, restaurants. How can you measure that? How can you apply, the net promoter score to a shopping mall and to the stores and whatever it is in the shopping mall?
Well, it's interesting. I'm going to pull back out of my manufacturing experience and bring back a concept that we used for quality systems. One of the things that matters, let's say, to customers who are going to a shopping mall is one, that they can find it easily. So what their marketing people did was made sure that, let's say, there might be a billboard right at the exit where the shopping mall is. The second thing is to see if these are all elements of the experience, right? Is there parking? Is there plenty of parking? Is it well lit? Can I park my car next to the store I want to go to? So there are all these things that make a shopping mall a very special experience that isn't necessarily about each individual store, but maybe it's about access to the store, or maybe it's about that the stores, let's say, are all open at the same time, or maybe that they're located a certain way. So those are all things that a shopping mall management can do to find out what their overall customer experience is and whether they would return to that mall.
Let's go to another commercial break and we'll be back for the last part of the program. Vamos a otra tanda de comerciales y ya estamos de nuevo con ustedes. How often can you do that, or should you do that?
Well, the answer to that question is really a function of the kind of business that you are in. So, for example, if you are a transactional business, let's say you're a rental car company, or you have lots and lots of people coming in and out, and your business cycle is short, then you obviously want to do it more frequently, perhaps weekly. If you are more of a, maybe the selling cycle is longer, or the transaction cycle is longer, then you might want to do, I did it like every couple weeks or once a month. And some businesses where the transactional cycle is much longer, let's say you're a manufacturer of heavy equipment and your selling cycle is 18 months, you may measure different components.
Yeah.
Or you may measure over a longer period of time. Some companies do it every 6 months. Some companies do it every year. It really is a personal, it's a choice based on your product and your service.
And who should do it? The marketer of the company or an outsider?
Well, I'm a big believer in a team effort, right? The marketing department, perhaps using a multifunctional work team, maybe from the business unit, because you do want to have your customer is going to interact with a variety of people in your organization. Their transaction will touch several members of the team. So there is the first component where there is some internal work going on, because an outsider may or may not be able to find just the right question to ask. So you do need to, the marketer does need to guide that conversation, right? A marketer that does have some skill in market research and can help frame the conversation and understand what they want to measure, right? And working with the management team. Now, when it comes to collecting the Net Promoter Score, it definitely needs to be done by a third party that manages that process, and that can interface with the customer in a way that is non-threatening to them. Because here in the United States, my bank, for example, when I finish my transaction with the bank, they'll tell me to go and take the survey. And then one thing that they'll say is, and be sure to give us a good score. Now that, of course, as you know, doesn't work.
No, if they tell you to give them a good score, then what are you going to say? What are you going to do? I mean, if you don't like it, if you don't like the service, or you don't like whatever they have, what are you going to say? You have to say, yeah, okay. That's what happens in so many places, so many restaurants. You like the food, all right? You're correct. What do I have to say? Okay, that's okay.
Exactly. The best way to measure the Net Promoter Score is to really preface the Net Promoter Score question, which is, how likely are you to refer our company? The best way to do that is to preface that question with just a couple more questions, or ahead of that one, that remind your customer of that specific transaction. So perhaps if you are a rental car agency or a shopping mall, for example, how easy was it to find a parking space close to the door? Those kinds of questions, so they remember exactly where they were.
Okay. I want to ask you something else. How do you think loyalty should be rewarded? A customer who is loyal, what can you give him, or what can you do in order for him to continue being loyal?
Well, there are some wonderful rewards going on, and more trends in terms of rewards. So, for example, first and foremost, here I go again. It's important to understand what matters to your customers so that you can give them more of that.
What they want.
You can give them
What
more
is
of what they
important
want.
to them.
Exactly. So, if you understand that, let's use an easy example, like let's say a restaurant. We were talking about restaurants earlier. So, a restaurant, let's say if what's important to them, one of the things that they use is these social media tools called Foursquare. Here in the United States, we have, you can check in, and if you check in and press a button on your smartphone that you are in a specific restaurant, oftentimes I've had the experience where I check in and I immediately get a coupon. I got a coupon for that visit. So right away, I was able to order another drink.
Yeah, because you like to drink.
Because I like to have a drink. So with the tools that marketers have these days with tracking customer purchases,
databases.
Yes, you can get coupons for the things that you actually buy and you want. You can use Facebook, you can use Foursquare, you can use all these tools that are matched up to a customer profile to give your customers more of what they want. Now, another trend that's going on, and I guess Foursquare plays into that, is this game, treating your customers and allowing your customers to play games with you. People really, really like that.
Not other games, but they have been using lately, but games. Get customers involved in a game that keeps them looking after the company, making suggestions and things like that.
Again, there are tools that customers can use. These days, in the world of research, because we are talking about loyalty, and if we need to measure it, right? So in the world of research now, instead of running these focus groups and bringing people together and spending all kinds of money, you can actually create a virtual focus group.
Yes.
Whether you do that as part of your Facebook fan page or whether you invest in a research technology that allows them to interact with you, you can reward customers with points or gifts or maybe even special events. People want to feel like they are part of something.
And they are human beings. Yeah, like somebody says, the fact that I become a client or a customer to some store or some company or some organization doesn't take my human being side out of me.
That is my favorite point of view. I think sometimes we think that when we cross a threshold in a company, now we are suddenly a title or,
Yeah, a title
or
or a number or a card or an ID card or something
and
like that.
nothing can be further from the truth. I think that organizations have the ability to build loyalty and word of mouth by focusing on first the social component and the need for their customers to interact and engage with that product or service.
Ivana, you have been great, and I would like to end the program by asking you to give an advice to Colombian marketers. What could that be?
I think the best thing any marketer can do, any part of the world, is truly understand who they are as a company and don't be afraid to let that personality shine through.
Thank you. I like that. And I thank you very much for being with me and being, outgoing and letting us know everything that you know and sharing everything with us. I thank you very much. And I hope to have you in Colombia pretty soon.
I can't wait to show up, Carlos. Thank you for coming.
All right. Ya ven ustedes pues la clase de persona, como dije la vez pasada, que es Ivana Taylor. Con ella podremos conversar todo el rato que queramos y vamos a sacar mucho provecho. Por eso los invitamos a que sigan con nosotros en Tiempo de Mercadeo. Muchísimas gracias y una feliz noche. Aspectos como las estrategias, la innovación, las comunicaciones y vamos a continuar en la noche de hoy, repito, en la ciudad de Cleveland, en el estado de Ohio. Esto lo haremos en un momento cuando regresemos. Ya volvemos. Ivana, good evening and welcome back.
Well, thank you. It's great being here with you.
A lot of things to talk about with you, but then I would like you to tell us how to make a customer loyal, because you have a lot of experience on that. So how can we make customers loyal?
Well, the best way to make a customer loyal, of course, is to first understand who they are, right? So we want to understand exactly.
Muy buenas noches, yo soy Carlos Fernando Villa y esto es Tiempo de Mercadeo Serie Internacional 2013. Como recordarán, la semana pasada estuvimos hablando en Cleveland con Ivana Taylor, una de las consultoras más afamadas del mundo. Con ella tratamos
who the customer is, perhaps we understand the industries that they're in, what matters to them. Just set a baseline for who is your customer, what matters to them, and maybe even do a little bit of preliminary research to understand why it is that they chose you in the first place, because we want to keep doing the things that work and we want to start understanding the things that don't work.
Jill Griffin is a lady who lives in Texas. She wrote books about loyalty. And when I did a program with her, she said the best way to make a customer by asking them a lot of questions and having them grade what the service is all about or the product and things like that. Is that really something that makes a customer loyal?
Well, I'm not always a huge fan of market research, but there is a place for that. And I think that it matters to measure a couple things. The first thing is to measure what matters most. And there is a book out there called The Ultimate Question that Fred Reichheld wrote, and he found out through his research that there really is only one.
Loyal is to treat the customer like a human being. That's
Brilliant.
It. Just like a person.
And there's an author out there by the name of Tony Alessandro who's written a book called The Platinum Rule.
Yeah.
So it's taking what you said right there, and taking it to the next level that I firmly believe in is treating your customers the way they want to be treated, not necessarily the way you want to be treated. So I think a key component is really understanding exactly what that is.
So many marketers and companies around the world are trying to make customers loyal